My name is Alexis Sersha, and again, I would like to welcome each and everyone to another Soul Vibes, which is a monthly show where we discuss everything and anything to do with the soul, soul connection, the feeling of the presence, and all the different experiences and issues and things that come up, and not just issues in a traditionally negative way, but things that we just didn't know, each one of us, before we allowed the presence of our soul, before we allowed so much connection, so much consciousness to be part of everyday life. I certainly didn't have idea as to what that means and how it's going to develop and what it takes and all of these kind of things, it's that a soul-filled life is involving. And so for me, like, if I look back at the last, let's say, 20 years, and I can't believe that, or perhaps a little less, where I can say, okay, this is where I consciously started to feel my soul. And it would have been about, 2011, 2012, and a few years before I changed, I sort of created a home for myself, and a home in which, then later I had different plans, but of course, as one has it, things do happen. And, majority of my awakening, I sort of experienced in this home. It's a home in the city, close to everything, close to Botanic Gardens, and center to all the different activities and nature and all of the things that I kind of needed as part of my journey. And it has been a huge journey in this way. And, I would like to invite each one to reflect on these last 15, 20 years. And even though, all of this has happened way before, like, I got drawn into, I was always drawn to these themes, but when I really sort of allowed myself to be pulled into was even in the early 90s when things really started to happen, this new energy, these new things were coming out. And that was like after the harmonic convergences of 89 and things that happened before that. In 89, I left my home country of Slovenia and I moved to London for a couple of years. And I had no idea what the journey was gonna happen, where I'm gonna end up in Australia on the other side of the world. But throughout this, I now know how I've been guided. And even when I wasn't so as conscious of this connection, there were some things, some pivotal moments in my life that they just became just one choice available in that time. And all the others, it was like as if all the other timelines and options were gone, and I could only really go with one thing. I had to choose this one thing and follow step by step the path that I was on. And I had no idea at that time, of course, what it meant or where this guidance came from. But I remember those pivotal moments because they were very unique in how they presented to myself and how I was. It's like, I woke up with one thing and then something happened during the day. I mean, nothing much. I could just go sit in the park and have lunch. And in that moment, all of the choices, all of the options became wiped out, and only one became visible. And I had to, in that moment, like there were a few pivotal moments where I just then changed in a big way, or have taken, the journey, even like leaving Slovenia. It happened pretty much in a week. Like I always had a feeling that I'm going to go traveling and perhaps never return to live there. But the way it happened was like I kind of had these dreams and dreams, and then the week and the day and the week came, and it's like, yeah, now is the time, and all the other options just disappeared. Like the option to continue my life in Slovenia just disappeared. It just wasn't there. It was like there was just this void. And so the only thing that I could do was just to follow what was in front of me. And so within, I think, a week or within 2 weeks, I packed, said goodbye, and left, and that was that. And so few times in my life this has happened. And even, let's say, if I look at my time before 2010, before the 2012, which was at that time such a huge year, we were looking forward to it. Some people would dread, some people were hoping that everything was going to change in an instant and everyone's going to be ascended and all of these kind of things. And some people thought that the world was going to end. It was a huge thing reflected in the movies and of that time and all of that. But I can see how, all of the things that I needed for the next 10 years, for the next 15 years, I put into place. Some like the car that I had, the ability, to all of a sudden have time to drive, to make choices where I kept on then deciding that, okay, I can't just dream about certain things. I have to actually do it. And that's where I sort of stopped working so much, because before that, it was so much about survival, making life in a new country, um, and all of these kind of things. And I had no time. I would have two, three jobs at the same time, my own private business, and all of these things that were going on. And yet, at around 2009, 2010, I realized, wow, if I want to implement what I dream about, what is in the back of my head that I want to do, I have to do it. And that's where I then really started to go on road trips. And they were short at the beginning, and then they became longer and longer as I became much more equipped, much more better to deal with the vastness of Australian wilderness. And so all of that, this journey, all of the preparations were for this consciousness to enter my life. Or perhaps that is not the right word, or is it, for the human part to become aware consciously of a soul, where it wasn't just a dream or a wishful thinking or faith, like, of the in the religions. The faith is a big thing, but faith is, but when you know and feel the presence of your own divinity in tangible ways, in fine ways, in undescribable ways, but for me it was tangible. Once I started to experience that in a way that I couldn't ignore it, that I couldn't, even my mind couldn't say anymore, "Oh, this is just imagination," or all of these things that say, no, no, divinity doesn't exist, or we just can hope to feel some faith or hope for it. All of that was gone. And then for years, it was all about learning to live with her, with the divinity, and him, the divinity, both he and her at the same time as oneness. And living as a human who, obviously is a female in this world of all these different polarities, of all these different pulls that keep pulling away, trying to pull away, trying to distract, trying to seduce into separation, into problems, into inner conflict, and all, and drama, and all of these things. It has been quite a full-on journey, and I invite, as I said, each one to reflect on how it's been for you. How has this journey been unfolding for you? And to feel this quiet but unbreakable assurance now that cannot now be broken, cannot now be distracted from, cannot be destroyed. Because once the anchor is so strongly in yourself, in your own divinity, they can't no longer be broken. Doesn't matter who is saying what, doesn't matter who's trying to manipulate or whatever so-called authority and power they have. They just are powerless in this inner sovereign space, in your inner sovereign space of where the divinity and human dance and meet and relate and cooperate and collaborate. And all of these words are pretty much very they don't actually really are able to explain and express the depth of all of the experiences and the feelings and the emotions and all and the assurances and all sorts of things that happen in that space. It is to be experienced for each one yourself, and for each one it has different, you have a different space, you have a different feeling to it, you have different experiences, and how you perceive that communication, that song, that dance that has entered your life. And all this life and many other lifetimes has been really a preparation for this, and now we are living it. And I was today, me, Alexis, I was reflecting on how, of course, how, as I said at the beginning, how different it really is. What from what I imagined. I remember there were a few years back there where, so many people in the groups that I was involved with, and it was all about, enlightenment, enlightenment, enlightenment. And now this word is pretty much meaningless to me. Like I hardly ever even think about it or even ponder it because it doesn't actually mean anything. Because once I am conscious of my own soul, of my own divinity, that pretty much is the end, like the goal of all of the lifetimes, and that I've had. To if I put them all in this linear order, and at the same time, the new goals pretty much are to continue to experience this incredible dance, to not just poof away, but to live it, to experiment with it, to be it, and to live life. And so, in many ways, that's why those kind of big words, like are completely irrelevant now to me, like the words enlightenment and realization and all of these kind of things that before were so important and were part of the journey. But now life is just experience and experimentation. And if I want to make it as an adventure, and also, like at times a big challenge in a different way than it used to be, not filled with fear, but this reality is challenging it in a huge way. It is challenging in a way that we become very conscious and fine and attuned, and heart is open and feeling and observant and noticing other people, other creatures. And so, with all this cleansing that is happening and all these transformations that are happening on earth, with all the things that are being revealed, to sort of watch and feel and notice suffering of others, whether it be human or other creatures, animal life, plant life, earth herself, himself. Or this is like much more, the intensity of this perception of all of these things goes up in a huge way. And so, the challenge, of course, in part of the journey is to become aware of boundaries, to keep, to become expert and a master at keeping flexible and fluid, but very indestructible and strong boundaries from what is mine, from what is not mine, in all of these things. And yet, these are the kind of challenges, because the world pushes back, the world, like the forces, or whatever one wants to call these, that want to keep, the energies that want to keep things the same at the status quo, that they want the power games, all the manipulations, and all of that has also upped its notch. It's also upped its game in a huge way. Even though once you can see through something, you see through something, it cannot deceive you anymore. And this too is part of being filled with soul, is that you can't really be deceived, you know, and you become in this raw awareness and authenticity with oneself. Like, I can see through the games. I can see, and I have my own explanations of things. Sometimes when I say certain things, some people look at me, they don't understand, because they don't have certain perceptions. If I go among people that are not, let's say, into the spiritual things and stuff like that, the language that for me is such a normal language, and for the people that have been on this spiritual journey, is a normal language, for many out there it's still very non-understandable language. Things that we talk about, it would makes no sense to someone who is not on this journey. And this too has been like this huge, part of these huge revelations or realizations, or coming to find out all of these things, is that how all these kind of work is very individual, how perceptions are very individual, how to live within this world of so many different perceptions and truths and perspectives, that and that are part of humanity, that are part of all life, whether visible or invisible, whether animal or plant or any other sort of kingdom. Each one of those has its own perceptions, and when you become so attuned, you can feel them. You can feel the truth. They have their own language, very clear, but not it's quite different than human language. So there are so many different layers to feel, to hear, to come to terms with, to come and make sense out of it, or to find a way to relate to these things. I find that one of the biggest jobs, like if I can express it in this way, is finding ways to relate to things. How do I make sense out of all of the things that I perceive, or all of every day there's something that comes to me, whether energetically, whether I feel it, or comes through the media, social media, or with people that I speak with, or and interact with. It matters not. There's always something new. And it's like, okay, so let's see, how do I relate to this? Whether, I find out something new, and then I have to incorporate that into my current belief systems and all of these things. Like, this is so different than, let's say, someone who is not awakened, because their thoughts and their work, or how they are, how they be, is so different, because they may be focusing on, you know, all these different kind of thoughts, and they don't notice the inner world. They don't notice what is going on the inside of them. So they may be upset about work, or trying to find ways, to do with family, to do with partner, to do with their children, to do with workmates or work, and all of these different changes. But they're not constantly kind of trying to doing not trying to but actually working on re-relating to things. And this is one attribute that is part of a soul-filled life that I didn't have I had no idea that this was going to be. And this also is part of why sometimes, like if I look at, let's say, last 5 years, like there's been waves up and down, up and down. And this is not about whether I feel good or positive or negative. That's not what I mean, up and down in that way. But I mean that more so to do with not even with clarity or not clarity, but it has to do with the experiences. So it's like something new comes, it like gets delivered to me, and then I unpack it and live it. And while I'm in that experience, like my relationship and my perception of my soul self, and I'm talking now from the human perspective, changes a lot, because while I'm in experience, it feels to me as a human as if the soul pulls back a bit. It's not right in my face, so to speak. It is not so present. It is just, it's kind of like giving space to the human to go through that experience. And when it happened first few times, I actually, as a human, I was starting to doubt. Was I just imagining things? Was I feeling the soul or wasn't I? Why can't, or I feel abandonment is like, why can't I feel such an intense presence of my soul at the moment? There are all of these different things. And then at times, then I would have to reconnect to that conscious perception of my soul in a different way. It's like as if it moved in my body. It's like as if it moved from space to I knew where to go, which spot in my body was space in my body to go in to meet soul. And then that changed and shifted. And perhaps, for a few days I wouldn't find this connection. And so stuff like that happens. And so this is one of those new kind of awarenesses about a soul-filled living, that how dynamic this relationship is, and how it keeps changing, and how the soul feels as if it comes closer and then it melds back into the background. And it's not like it's moving or abandoning the human self. It is just that its presence, its perception becomes much more dim in let's say, if we look at a light, like let's say how you can turn, if you have a desk light or something that has a volume, or let's say a sound on speakers. You have a volume, but you can also put your light stronger or less strong, up and down. And it's kind of the same with the soul presence. And this now, because I've had this experience now quite a few times, it's not something that worries me, or that I or even think about. Now I have this trust as a human that okay, I'm just going through an experience, and then it's like after that experience, when it's completing, we come back together again, like partners that then exchange the ideas and experiences and wisdom to do what we've just gone through. And these kind of going through experiences, it's parallel in the midst of all else. Your life just keeps going and happens. And while I keep doing everything. I keep maintaining my home and all of these things, when in having relationships and things like that. All the while, certain experience comes into the forefront, and I dive deep, and the soul is very quiet in those depths of things through experience, but it's very, very much present, and it never leaves, and it's support, and the feeling of wholeness, and the feeling of it's not even just a feeling, it's like this mm, pipe that goes deep into my inner well of well-being. It's always open, and I can always feel that self-love. And especially if I consciously decide, wake up in the morning and I feel into the self-love, and it's like, wow, yes, I feel it. Even though the soul is not loud, so to speak, the self-love is always there. Sometimes I have to consciously not go down that pipe, or I'll make sure that I feel it, and I feel that radiance, expanding and breathing with me, and hugging me and nurturing me. And so there are so many different layers of all of this, in different and of quite a different way of living, and every time, even though like my life looks very similar to other people's, perhaps, that like I still am human, I do all the human things, and yet the inner world, it is just vastness, and on the inside all of these huge vast things happen, that other people for themselves, not of my world, inner world, but of their own inner world, are completely blind to. And this is what it means, that, that's why it also takes a while, really. This awakening does take a while, because you have to become so attuned, you have to become practiced in all of these inner disciplines, in all of these inner ways of doing things, because you have to deal with such dynamic vastness of things, and things that are not the same. They keep, they change a lot, and they move. The color, the color, the flavor, the taste, the sound of inner world keeps changing a lot. And but the human, in these years of awakening, has become trusting, because it had also tangible experiences of trustworthy events. It became, the soul took the human, guided the human through experiences that built trust, that developed trust, that allowed this awareness, and in the feeling and experience of always being supported. But at the same time, building this trust means that sometimes things went wrong, and they went very, very wrong. Not in a way like in the old way, but it was, and then later I realized as a human also, that these experiences is actually what helped me to get that unshakable, unbreakable trust, because the human thought, that was what the mind thought in error, that trust has to do with, okay, now that I'm soul filled and I'm conscious of my soul, and now just good things are going to happen, and everything's always just going to go my way. This is what the mind thought. And the mind thought in its ideas that will always be confirmed, its ideas about the world, about all such things. But that was error, because the mind didn't even realize how erroneous a lot of its ideas really were. Not only limited, but actually very much upside down. What it thought love was, what it thought Power and powerlessness was what it thought soul was, what it thought it was, and what it thought relationships was. A lot of the things, the way I, as Alexis, used to think or perceive, was actually very much upside down. And so, a lot of experiences, what they at the time looked like they were, so, it's like as if something's going wrong. And I would think, well, why? If my soul is present, why is this happening? But I also have had to learn and realize and feel that no matter what happens, that the number one is my own soul connection, that I connect with my soul, that I love myself, regardless of anything, whether good and bad. You see, because this wouldn't be as strong if I just didn't had good experiences to go through. Then it's never tested. This connection is never tested. It doesn't go through anything. It's the same as like a relationship with anything or anybody. If you have like a partner, if you have a friend, you go through ups and downs in this way, and then years pass and you can say, wow, this person really is a friend, this person truly is my life partner, perhaps because we've gone through so many experiences, and yet we are still together in this way. And so this other person, you can trust them because you have gone through thick and thin in this way. So this was one of those big errors, and a lot of, I notice in spiritual communities, especially, there is this wishful thinking also, to just try to, okay, now I'm a creator. This is what the mind says. The human still, the ego or whatever you want to call this part, that says, okay, everything's just now going to be my way and it's all going to work out the way I have my ideas about it. But in reality, when you really kind of feel into it and look into it, it is much, much more about all parts of self surrendering to your divinity and surrendering and giving in. And it has to do much more about acceptance and all of these things. And people, many people, especially people that perhaps has had difficult pasts or traumas and all of these things, these are some of the hard uh, experiences to go through or let yourself dive into. These kind of experiences of trust, experiences of letting go, because for a lot of the human experiences that are, mm, well, all of it really, when you look at it, is about control and power out of fear. But when you're letting that go, the fear, you're just giving in to your soul. You're giving in to yourself. You let go of that control. And those are very full-on experiences as well, those acts of letting go of control. And I had huge issues with that. They were huge uh, events for me. Like, even though sometimes these kind of monumental events would happen like within few seconds, when they actually consciously happened, when there was that giving in, when there was that letting go, when there was that jumping off the cliff, where in a cliff where I couldn't see for the fog and mist, I couldn't see the bottom. Is anyone, any part of me gonna catch me? Is my soul real? Or am I just going into madness or what, there? Because these things, they're not like written in books, or they weren't at the time, at that time, not in this real way. And even if they are written in books, when you come it's like if you imagine yourself, when you come, it doesn't matter how many times you perhaps saw people bungee jumping on a video and even perhaps in real time or skydiving. But when you're standing at the edge and having to step off, that's a personal experience and very, very different in us, regardless of how many books you read. So, and especially when it's the first times, when these kind of acts of giving in, acts of surrender, acts of trust, from you to you, that that were huge. Took huge courage. And yet, like when I started at the beginning, is now when I can look back as in the last few decades. It is just this beautiful story unfolding, and I can see how one thing is connected to another, and how, all of the preparations that I was making when I was unconscious, how they filled and served me in that journey of awakening, in that journey of coming back home. All of the things served me, and I was able to utilize, and the area where I was, all of the things that it's like I prepared them and I didn't even know I was preparing them. And so this feeling of connection, of interconnectedness, of being guided, of being held all the time, whether I felt it or whether I didn't feel it, was always there. I just at times didn't notice it, and I didn't connect the dots, and I didn't connect the threads. And yet, when all of these threads come together, when I consciously notice them, that's that feeling of such immense beauty, of such immense ecstasy, of such immense gratitude, and all of these feelings and emotions that are hard to describe because many of them don't have names, and that but are very real. Every time when things come together, it's just like every time I come out of a certain experience, and the soul, so to speak, shows itself to me again in much more intense, in much more louder or present way, so that the human can actually connect and speak and interact. And this is how kind of I experience this, because is that being coming into oneness, where as a human I am one with myself, with my soul, and then the soul is not loud or present in a different way, but I feel that nurturing, and then the soul part can step away again, step aside or step away, and then the human in me, inside of me, can face her, can face him, my soul, it, because it doesn't have a gender. It is that it is. And then we can relate in that way. And so that too is one of the interesting things that, like I sort of have gone through, and I see other people saying also, and that's why very often people can say certain things. They say, oh, I now just feel oneness, and it is no more time for, the soul and the human. That is a thing of the past. And me too. I was, when I for the first time experienced this oneness or the quietness of the soul, I thought, oh, okay, so this is new, and this is how it's going to be now. But then now that I've lived with these for many more years, I realize it's a dance. I come together, so to speak, and then I come a bit apart so that I can relate in a different way. There really isn't a, like a final one way where, okay, this is it and that's that. You know, so it's a dance, it's a relationship, it's a You know, it's a, yeah, it's a dance, heartful dance, where all these things happen and are, and it just, I guess, depends on all that inner focus as to how I experience myself in the inner world, you know. And of course, then you have the outside world as well, to experience, and that's, you know, that has been quite full on in a way also, because again, coming from going through you know, we've gone through so many periods, different periods, periods of being, feeling in a void, periods of feeling passionless, periods of then coming back into passion, periods of feeling quite dead, or, you know, some people, they go into depression, going through anxiety, all these things on this journey that we've experienced, that we've gone through. And and then to come again over and over back into the self, back into the wholeness of self. And each, through all of those different stages that we've gone through, you know, we've had to let things go, and let things be, and accept, and all of that kind of things. And many things we thought we were done with, and then we realized, you know, that no, we just had to relate to everything, because everything is still here, you know. This world is still here, other people still here, the things of a human life are still here, you know. We still live in the economy, we live with other people, we live in a particular country. You know, to go around, you need some kind of vehicle or public transport, or, you know, like you need to cook, you need to wash yourself, take a shower, wash your teeth. All of these things are still here, and that too, but that also has changed, because it has, somewhere along the way, all of it became sacred. And all of it, when there was that experience, or many experiences, to do with how present, how involved your consciousness is with everything, with the creation of everything that you see in and you experience, and co-creating with others. um there are these realizations of, you know, firstly, how immense it all is, but also how sacred it all is. How, you know, the soul self doesn't think of itself as, or parts of itself, or parts of its creation, as less or more sacred. You know, it's not how it feels. It's not how it thinks. All of it is sacred. It's the human part that slowly but surely, through all the experiences, realizes and starts seeing, wow, everything I do is so sacred. Everything I feel, all my emotions, all my experiences that I thought were mundane, or perhaps I thought that I was not supposed to or allowed to feel them, that they were taboo to even consider or think about or feel them. You know, many people, or a normal person, let's say a normal person, for a normal person, inside they have so many walls which are taboo, you know, they're filled with taboos, like don't go there. And even though it's all in themselves, they got the impression, they were trained to not allowed to go and feel certain things, not allowed to experience certain things, not allowed to think certain things, you know. And especially lately, we've had, and we continue to have, this kind of, a lot of, you know, enforcing of control as to what you even think on the inside, what you feel, what you allow yourself to perceive, to consider. and we're not talking about some kind of, like criminal things. It's just about, uh, uh, to me, that are just such normal things that I have no problem with, or even don't think twice about thinking. It doesn't mean I act on all things, but imagination is free. Wild wilderness on the inside is free. It doesn't follow the rule. That's what it means to be wild and free. You don't follow the rules of the cage, or the rules. You're not, like when they take horses for dressage, and all of those things that are faking it, that these are not wild. I mean, it looks a certain way, but like when you touch that wilderness, which in many ways is represented by the feminine, that doesn't live in cages. It has its own, mm, it has its own rules, very much so. It's not chaos. It's a very in touch, intense, passionate part of yourself that doesn't live in cages. If you put it in cage, even like, let's say, if you look at animals, people will say, oh, let's go and see wild animals or wildlife in a zoo. Animals in a zoo are not wildlife. They are caged life, you know? So but the wildlife is has its own rules, it has its own laws, it has its own trust. Feel it in yourself. It has its own unbound creativity. It has its own freedom. And these are the kind of things that when I say people have taboos to go and experience, because once you start experiencing these things, you can't fit yourself permanently into all these little boxes and little cages. Then you feel yourself free. And so, once a person does and owns these kind of parts, it's not that, mm, it's you very much know when things are appropriate. Because let's say I feel myself so free, I have no problem to cooperate with others. And I have no problem with going to spaces where, like, let's say I go into a shop, let's say, I know that's not my space. I know there are rules to be able to allow to go into that space. It's, if I start picking up things and throwing them in the wall, or start shouting and do whatever, they will eject me out of that space. So I'm not talking about those kind of things. This is not what being wild or owning your wild part is about. When you feel it, you know how things also work, so you can adjust. And it's like, okay, when I go to the shop, I know how to behave in a shop, but I don't feel myself limited by being in a shop. I'm free, and because I'm free, I can go in a shop, and then I behave in what's appropriate in a shop, even though inside I still feel that wild part, because I know that I will walk out of the shop, but also while I'm in the shop, I still have full access to those parts of me that are wild, because I don't lose humanity or human civilization or human behavior. When I go, actually, it's the opposite. I can behave much more appropriately, and I don't have to do silly rebellions, because I feel myself so free. So when I go on the road, I don't have to speed and do some road rage and whatever, because why? I feel free. And I know that, we have to do to I'm free to go on the trips. And if I follow the rules, that gives me the freedom to go on the trips. If I didn't, I would lose that freedom and ability to drive and all sorts of things. So it's a very different kind of, and again, this comes back to that relating to everything. It has to do with constantly in joy, in being in joy with doing this, finding new ways to perceive, finding new ways to relate. And it always, these new ways is how I'm relating to things, which, as I said, people, unawakened people don't really do that. But this is part of, when you're with soul, you're constantly revising things and in wising them, making them wise, and also revising, meaning that, changing the perspectives, because you're constantly expanding. And as every time that I expand, those ideas that I had from before, even from yesterday, they're now too small. So I have to revise them, but it's a joy to revise them again, to re-relate, to change the perspective, to find a way how I can now incorporate all these things into my new experience, my more expanded experience, my more wise experience. And so we constantly revise these things. We constantly change the definitions and perspectives on soul, on freedom, on sovereignty, on self-love, and all of these things. And so what I sort of was getting at earlier, one of the threads that I was getting at was that, like when people often will say, well, this person has changed, on that, in that month or that year they were saying that, and now they're saying the opposite. But this has to do with these kind of cycles and things. So it's in the whole picture of things. They always they camp, not that everyone's always speaking the truth, but they're authentic in that time, and to the best of their ability, they were speaking their authentic truth at that time. But with the expansion, with becoming wiser, with having more experiences, we keep expanding our views. And like, for example, some people may talk about, oh, how it's all this oneness, with the soul comes oneness, and then it's a forever oneness. And that is true in a way, that, as I said, sometimes I feel myself, when I'm in experience, I just feel myself as this oneness, because the soul and the human are experiencing, there's no barrier and no separation. But I don't mean the old way separation. I just can't tell, in that moment, in that time, what is human, what is soul, because we're both experiencing something. And then, as I said, we come out of that experience. And then again, there's some kind of space in between human and soul. And then we can communicate in a different way. And so if I was saying, well, there's this oneness experience, and now this is a forever thing, it wouldn't be, it was an error, because then after I come out of that experience, again we have the separation. So again, this is true when I say human and the soul. So so there are so many of these things that, like I see also other people when they channeled and all of that, these things weren't known to no one, to not anybody, because we are in a physical, it's a unique experience as a human that we have, but also all other creatures have, they have unique experiences, their own experiences, legitimate on this earth. And so but we keep expanding, and our understanding keeps expanding, but we weren't any more or less truthful. So again, I'm talking about, for people that are authentic, because then, of course, there is a discernment. There needs to be a discernment. This is one of those big things that also I didn't realize, before that, just how perceptive I was going to become of bad apples. And this, I for those that perhaps don't, different, where English is not your first language, bad apple is someone who has bad intentions, or for whatever reason, it doesn't matter. They could have a bad childhood, bad experiences, tough upbringing. None of that. It matters from a different perspective, but in this way, you have to become, you're not anymore naive. I'm not anymore naive of these things, and just see people. You can see the soul. I can feel the soul, and I know that they're a soul fulfilled being, and that they have their own purpose. But at the same time, when I see a bad apple, meaning that someone's manipulative, or whatever they are, a narcissist, or all these things, with could be with a beautiful face, with a smiley face, with all sorts of title. But if I see they're a bad apple and they have bad intention, I'm very aware then of that and act on that. I don't have to say anything. But in this, I didn't. This is also one attribute of this life, where I didn't know that this was going to be such a huge part, to not to step out of all of the naivety in this kind of, how can I say, fantasy ideas of how the world is and how people are in it. And whatever that you can see divinity in everyone, that's fine, one thing. But on the practical level, you also need to be able to see if they're a bad apple towards you, and they don't mean you harm in any way, whether it's psychological, physical, whatever, or financial, whatever. And so this being so mm, clear with things, also, this is not one of those easy things, because it was in many ways much easier and much more fancy, I don't know what other word to use, to look at things in a much more naive way. So this coming to maturity with this whole, with this kind of soul-filled life, yeah, it's in many ways quite different. Just like a teenager can't really imagine what they will be like in 40 or 50 or 60, 70, The same, we were very young in this way. And I don't mean in years, I mean in experience as to what soul-filled life feels like, what it is like to live it in this world that we find ourselves, in. And this world is very, I mean, to me personally, as Alexis, it's a very puzzling, like, you can't quite put the finger on it. It also evades the pinpointing or this final definition or explanation. Like, I, as Alexis, I can't sort of give one perspective on this world and then, okay, that's it, because it keeps changing. As I keep changing, the world keeps changing. But one thing is for sure, that our world does include, our world of humanity includes everything. And I didn't even realize, and I guess most of us didn't, because that's why many are so shocked as to what is being uncovered, as to just how much hard, hard life and suffering it includes, and what tough journeys so many people in the world have. And how many choices they make, and how some people turn into good apples and some people turn into bad apples, and so there's so many things that are involved in this world. And so, gone are the days when I would just every year all comes, if you sort of move into spiritual circles, every year it's like, okay, the 8th of the 8th, and the humanity's ascending. Oh, the solar flares and will ascend on this day, and this equinox, and humanity will ascend year after year after year after year. I mean, it's nice to kind of live in that naivety, but mm, the depth of perspective that you get with soul-filled living is actually gives you quite different pictures and ideas and perspectives on all of these things. So in having to kind of find our way, each one of us, with all of this, it's quite a big job. So we are doing a big job. And so I think, yes, we've come to the end of today's session. So I'm going to have a drink. And as you see, like my background looks a bit different. I've been playing around with things, redecorating, moving things around. So, but it's not finished yet. So this is like a little temporary before I can finish it all. I've been enjoying the physicalness of things so much, and just changing things, repainting, redecorating. It's just I'm just having a lot of fun, and it's amazing how physical it all is, and how much enjoyment I find, and how much grounding I find, from mentioning before how I've gone through those stages when I felt completely passionless, completely disconnected, and even like things that now I find such an easy thing to do and complete. In those stages, in that realm work, it felt like they just was just like huge and impossible to even tackle, to complete. And this too, if you look at your own life, how masterfully it has been designed in this way, that when you needed space to just do that realm work, somehow so much of physicalness of everyday life was taken care of somehow. And then when you come back after that integration into your own physicalness, into your own life, how easy it is. Then things just become so almost seamless to do and complete and tackle. And so, but each one of us are in a different space. So if you find yourself that you're not yet so physically grounded, or that you don't have yet passion, don't worry, because again, if you've taken anything from today, from our exploration today, it is how there are all of these cycles and waves and ups and downs, and we don't come together on this. Like, we don't travel, each of us, we don't travel together on this. We have our own unique cycles. And is that acceptance and surrender to your own uniqueness of where you are, of what you're experiencing, of what you are unpacking, what you're unfolding. It is all very appropriate. And you can trust yourself, trust your process, trust everything about your life, like as to what you're experiencing. The grass really isn't greener anywhere else, so to speak. It is the greenest where you are for you. That is your place. And if ever comes a need that you have to move or change, you still to take your own self, your own creator self, your own inner world with you. Even if you do the physical change, or you change location. So, yeah, you always have you from the time of birth, from the time of when it comes, when you leave and transition. And on the other side, you always have you. It is you with you. You are your number one thing for your own self. Each one of us are a number one thing for each one of our own selves. And with that, I would like to say thank you to each and every one for joining us again. And whether you're watching live or watching later, it's been a pleasure. And yes, until next time, enjoy.